The locomotive rolls past at walking speed, draped in black, its bell tolling in the night. Towns empty to the right of way. Women hold children close. Men remove their hats. For one slow hour, the rails become a mourning line and a nation becomes a family. This was the power of funeral trains and how we said goodbye before television, before jets, before we learned to grieve through screens. Act 1. Setup. Picture the United States in the age of steam. Railroads are the arteries. Towns measure their worth by the rhythm of whistles. The depot is the heartbeat, sending people, mail, cattle, and crops across the land. In a country this spread out, distance is more than miles. It's weather, time, and risk. Railroads shrink all of it. They also reshape our most intimate moments: birth, marriage, and death. By the 1860s, Americans live with war, with disease, with loss. Mourning has rules: black bands on sleeves, veils, quiet parlors, framed portraits on mantels. When a great figure dies, the old village procession won't do. The republic stretches too far. The challenge is simple and impossible. How do you let everyone stand by the road and say goodbye? You build a road that goes everywhere. The story begins in a way that feels like a novel. In 1865, a special rail car appears in Washington. It's a government car, a rolling parlor built for a president who prefers simple things. He never rides it while alive. The war ends in April. Then a gunshot in a theater turns victory into grief. Suddenly, that rail car has a purpose. It will carry Abraham Lincoln home. Lincoln's funeral train traces a black ribbon across the map: Washington to Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Albany, west to Buffalo, Cleveland, Columbus, south to Indianapolis, Chicago, then Springfield. The route covers roughly 1,600 miles in 13 days. The speed is deliberate, the schedule a kind of liturgy. At night, bonfires bloom beside the tracks. In the day, schools close and factories empty. Millions step out, line the ballast, and lift their eyes as the draped locomotive and the catafalque car roll by. That train does more than move a body. It teaches a young nation how to mourn together. It turns steel into ceremony. From there, the pattern sets. Ulysses S. Grant dies in 1885 at a mountaintop cottage in New York. The rails carry him down to Albany and on to New York City for a parade on a scale the country has never seen. James Garfield in 1881. William McKinley in 1901. The cars wear black bunting. The locomotive bells do not sing, they ache. Railroads publish special bulletins, issue orders to clear tracks, and post police along fences to keep onlookers safe. Newsprint ink rubs off in people's hands as they read the route and calculate when to walk to the nearest crossing. Funeral trains aren't only for presidents and generals. In cities from Los Angeles to Milwaukee to New York, street railways build funeral cars, dark, polished trolleys with a central place for a casket and benches for mourners. They roll out to new garden cemeteries beyond the city limits, fields of trees and birdsong where people can find quiet. Railroading brings dignity and order to sorrow. It makes a path from church to grave even when roads are mud and wheels sink to the hub. By the early 1900s, America can do grief at scale. Lineside telegraphers inform stations down the route. Porters wipe down brass rails. Conductors carry special orders tucked in leather pouches. Flags hang at half-staff on depots, and towns tilt their hats in unison as the train creeps past. Then the technology changes. Automobiles conquer distance for the living. Airplanes begin to conquer it for the dead. Radio, then television, bring grief into the living room. But for a time, the train remains the only way to make farewells feel communal. The story isn't done. Act 2. Escalation. In April 1945, word speeds over the wires. Franklin Roosevelt is gone at Warm Springs, Georgia. He led the nation through depression and war. Now he will travel home by rail. The casket boards at night. The train glides north through Carolina's pine and Virginia clay. At small stations and farm crossings, people gather with flashlights and candles. They see a dim shape, a shine of brass, a glint of a guard saber. They stand in silence and feel the wheels drum their breath. In Washington, the nation's capital stands still. After the service, the journey continues to Hyde Park. The rails carry not only a president, but a chapter of American life. 2 decades later, the ritual returns with a jolt. The year is 1968. Robert F. Kennedy's campaign ends in gunfire. He lies in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Then his family chooses the rails. The route runs from Penn Station to Washington, D.C., through New Jersey marshes, past row houses and backyards, across the Delaware and the Susquehanna. The car windows open. Photographers lift their cameras. Paul Fusco, riding aboard with a press pass, aims his lens outward. He catches America factory workers, teenagers on rooftops, families waving dish towels, firefighters on ladder trucks, black and white, rich and poor, all turn toward a passing train. The day becomes a river of faces. The trip should take a few hours. It takes the whole day. It is beautiful, and it is hard. The crowd surge too close. At one point in New Jersey, a separate train strikes onlookers gathered near the tracks. People are hurt. 2 die. The railroad system strains and bends and learns harsh lessons. For many, that day feels like the last time a nation will gather by the tracks to mourn as one. But to understand why the tradition fades, it helps to know how it worked when it thrived. A funeral train is logistics dressed in black. Railroads issue a special timetable. Trackside signals hold all other traffic. Crews walk the line in advance, checking joints, listening for a loose plate, tightening a bolt. The arrangement of cars is deliberate. A locomotive up front, sometimes 2, burnished but somber. A baggage or guard's car. The car with the casket, sometimes a modified parlor car with glass sides. Then cars for family, clergy, military honor guards, and officials. Speeds are slow, sometimes 20 miles an hour, sometimes less. The delay isn't only respect, it's safety and spectacle. Slower speeds mean bystanders can see, can weep, can wave a handkerchief, and feel a moment with the departed. The slow pace also controls the wind that might tug at flags and bunting. Crews take pride in a smooth ride. They know the eyes of towns, and the eyes of history sit on their shoulders. Ceremony layers onto logistics. The morning newspapers list the schedule and the route. Schools announce half-days. Farmers leave chores for a moment, propping pitchforks against fence posts. Veterans wear their caps. Policemen keep people off ballast and away from ties. The depot master steps to the platform as the bell tolls the same note over and over. An iron metronome counting the distance between a moment and history. In cities, funeral streetcars do their own careful work. A tram pulls up to a church door. The motorman and conductor speak softly. Benches gleam with varnish. Brass fittings shine. The coffin rides inside, never on a wagon in the dust. Mourners sit opposite and watch the city pass slowly in the window. Out on the cemetery line, the car rolls through gates into a landscape built for peace. The whole trip treats the body and the family with dignity, and it sets a tone. We are not rushing away from grief. We are moving with it. So why does it shift? Why do we stop gathering along fences to watch a black-draped train? Part of the answer is practical. By the 1950s and 60s, America's passenger railroads are shrinking. Highways pull riders into cars. Airports pull them into planes. In 1971, most private railways hand their passenger business to a new company, Amtrak. Special movements like funeral trains become harder to arrange. Freight schedules tighten. Liability worries rise. The rules for crowds near tracks harden. The era of thousands pressing close to the right-of-way ends. Part of the answer is cultural. We learn to watch together instead of stand together. Radio and television bring ceremonies into our homes. Watching becomes safer, easier, more controllable. Security concerns grow, especially for public figures. Motorcades on closed roads and flights on military planes are simpler to control than hundreds of miles of trackside crowds. And part of the answer is how grief itself evolves. Americans spend more time in private mourning and less in public procession. Funeral homes handle details once shared by neighbors. Cemeteries move further from city centers. Cremation rises. The need to roll a casket through town streets fades. The ritual of lining a track gives way to the ritual of watching a broadcast and sharing a memory online. Still, the rails keep their pull. In December 2018, a blue and white locomotive marked with a presidential seal Union Pacific 4,141 pulls a short train through Texas. Inside rides George H.W. Bush. Crowds gather at crossings and pastures. People hold flags in hands over hearts. Children sit on shoulders. The scene feels both new and very old. For a few hours, the country remembers the language of the rails. Slow, steady, solemn. Act 3, climax and aftermath. The idea behind the funeral train is simple, but the effect is enormous. It lets people meet history on their doorstep. It brings the weight of a public life to the scale of a backyard glance. It stitches grief into a single garment, town by town, mile by mile. Lincoln's train did that in a nation torn apart. It invited victory and sorrow to sit side by side. It allowed veterans in blue and farmers in gray to stand within a few feet of each other and feel something that wasn't war. It told an angry, aching land that a leader belonged to all of it, not only to the people who voted for him. Grant's train did that in a nation learning how to honor a general who became a flawed and decent president. FDR's train did it when the world was still burning in Europe and the Pacific. RFK's train did it when the country trembled over what it wanted to be. In each case, the slow roll of steel through neighborhoods turned a large public loss into 1,000 small private moments shared at the edge of track and grass. There is even a deeper rhythm under the wheels. Trains have a kind of heartbeat. Cross ties pass under thump, 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 thump. Mourning has a rhythm to shock, cry, remember, release. When a funeral train moves, those rhythms line up. That's why the scenes stick. White gloves on railings, a child waving a little flag, a mother holding a hymnal on a porch, the blur of a bunting, the flag's slow lift in the wake. But everything that makes the ritual moving makes it fragile. It relies on a system that prioritizes one train over all others. It demands crews at hundreds of road crossings and fences. It asks for patience from railroads and trust from crowds. It requires a country most of us no longer live in, a country where time slows because something sacred is passing. After 1968, railroads leap into a high-speed race to survive. They merge. They shed roots. They turn their attention to freight with a hunger. The appetite is for velocity and reliability, not ceremony. The space for a national funeral on steel narrows to almost nothing. In the few times we touch it, the Bush train in Texas, a local police officer's casket down a trunk line, the feeling returns, but it's a cameo, not a long-running play. So the tradition that once felt inevitable becomes rare. To find it, you look to photographs and diaries. You look to Paul Fusco's images from the RFK train faces, lit by sun, by grief, by hope. You look to Library of Congress prints of a city waiting in black. You read a telegrapher's notes about clearing a line at night for a slow movement with a bell set to toll. The rails that once carried farewells between cities now hold heavy coal and containers. The sun still rakes the ballast. The steel still sings. But few now gather to watch a leader move past. If we gather at all, we gather on screens. Twist, insight. Here's the quiet insight buried in the romance. Funeral trains weren't only about moving the dead. They were about moving the living. They turned spectators into participants. They sent grief out of state houses and cathedrals and poured it down the line into towns with no parade route and no lush cemetery gates. They made mourning democratic. And when we lost them, we didn't just change transportation. We changed the shape of public grief. We traded the warmth of a trackside crowd for the glow of a television. We kept the ceremony, but lost the shared air, the shared weather, the shared hush that falls when a horn sounds down the creek bed. There's another twist. The era we call lost never fully ended. Bits of it survive in small ways. A firefighter's casket rides an old interurban track to a hillside cemetery. A heritage railroad drapes a coach in black for a town leader. A veteran's family charters a short line for a final ride. When those things happen, you see how the old language still works. Steel wheels, steady pace, communities watching, hands over hearts. A final whistle that sounds like a prayer. Reflection. Takeaway. What do we learn when we follow these trains? We learn that technology doesn't just move us. It moves how we feel. Rails once made it possible to grieve together at a national scale. They created a funeral that belonged to everyone within earshot of a whistle. If you lived near a line, history rolled past your garden, and you were part of it. We learned that rituals rise from practical needs. Mud roads and long distances pushed families onto streetcars and interurban lines for funerals. Those practical choices grew into a way of showing respect that felt right. The slow ride, the polished wood, the careful hands, the moment when a city paused for 10 minutes at a crossing. When cars and planes made different choices easier, the rituals changed, not because we cared less, but because our world shifted around us. We learned that lost can mean stored, not gone. The Bush train in Texas proved that we can pull this language off the shelf when we want it. The evidence is in the faces at crossings, in the quiet in people's hands, in the way a whistle will always sound like distance and time and memory. And we learn something about ourselves. We like to be part of big moments. We want our children to remember where they stood when the train went by. The screen can't give you the smell of creosote, the flicker of flag bunting in a slipstream, the shared silence that passes like a wave when the engine rounds the bend. So here's my question for you. If your town got one last chance to stand by the tracks for a final national farewell, would you go? Would you bring your kids? What would you want them to feel in that moment? If this journey through America's long, slow goodbyes moved you, tap like, drop your memory or your question in the comments, and subscribe for more hidden history brought to life each week. New episodes are on the way, and you won't want to miss where the tracks lead next.